Hi, this is Jeff Nyquist with another edition of Friends and Enemies. I'm in the United States. My co-host Alex Benesch is in Germany, and we're going to be talking about Trump's tariffs. Of course, there was a pause this week on the tariffs, and I found out that even Chinese ships en route to the United States are exempted. So that's interesting. So, Alex, tell us what you think about these tariffs and where they're headed. What is the news you've got?
Okay, let me just skip to my section here. I actually put these notes under the in the war chapter because I think this is obviously more than just economics. Obviously, I mean, there's those who say this is a decoupling of these economies, the American one and the Chinese one, and just the fundamentals of it are quite remarkable. Right, so we're talking stuffed toys, dresses, chandeliers, furniture, kitchenware, and grilling items, which flow to the United States every year. I kid you not. Stuffed toys, dresses, chandeliers. So the U.S. exported $143 billion in goods to China in 2024. 143, while $438 billion worth of goods went in the other direction. Now, of course, the Trump admin says that they want to help lure more manufacturing back to the U.S., creating jobs at home, stanching the flow of U.S. money to China, which would be, in theory, a reversal of the disastrous developments that we saw when Henry Kissinger finally got to convince President Nixon to make that fatal mistake after 10 years of theater from the Russians and the Chinese when they pretended to hate each other, wanting to go to war. Goldman Sachs estimates that between 10 million and 20 million jobs in Chinese factories are geared towards satisfying American consumers' demand for homeware, toys, the latest electronic gadgets, and other imported products. So, all these news reports, and I have the statistics here, the news reports mention stuffed toys, dresses, chandeliers, furniture, kitchen and grilling items, many useless items, or items that can be made domestically or elsewhere. A lot of this is actually a waste of money. So Americans would be better off if they spend their money in another way or invested into an ETF index fund or something the like. So I have the current list here. On top of this, now these are China exports to the United States. On the very top, that's $124 billion, we have electrical and electronic equipment. Wait a second. Now, this monitor right here, this black monitor here, this is a Samsung. Now, that's a company from South Korea. Now, I don't know exactly where it's made. It may be assembled in China, but that product, that brand Samsung, is South Korean. Now, this is LG. I'm not sure if is LG an American brand. Life's Good. I don't know. Maybe it's also Korean.
It might be from Texas. I don't remember.
Yeah. So and then some of these main boards. Now, this machine here and this machine over there. Main components are from ASUS. I think that's an American company. So I always buy my boards from ASUS. Now, some chips that are used on these boards and some additional boards, they're made from Texas Instruments. There's a projector over there. People can't see it, but it's right over there in the ceiling. It's a projector which uses the DLP chip, which is made by Texas Instruments. What else we got? Phones. I have here a Samsung phone, again. That's South Korea. There's an iPhone 14, Apple, that's American. And back there's another iPhone. Again, this thing was assembled in China, the Foxconn factory, whatever. But it's still an American company, right? So what else do we got? Mackie speakers. Mackie could be American. Not so sure. The capture card that I'm using right now for this camera signal, the capture card is Blackmagic Design. That's an American company. Also, the camera over there, it's also a Blackmagic camera. That's an American an American camera. The lens is vintage Zeiss. That's German. We got some Universal Audio. That box right there that's handling my audio, that box right there is from Universal Audio. It's a Volt interface. That's also an American company. I don't know where it's assembled. There's a Asus monitor over there. My router, I think it's a German product. So yeah, I don't actually have anything. I don't see anything that's really a Chinese brand. Right?
But so many parts are made of things are made in China.
But
and raw material parts.
Exactly. Yeah. But there's another thing. I got this. I read this report or this study. This was about cybersecurity, right? So let's say a company like Universal Audio, okay? They say we put these little boards in these boxes, and it needs a specific number of specific chips that are soldered to the board. So they contract a company to make a specific chip and these dies that are in there. So this company that is subcontracts another company, which will subcontract another company. And this is kind of an intricate system that has security risks. So sometimes it's not clear who actually really assembled that chip. And also, the Chinese are using, or Chinese have been using products from what's it called, TSMC or TMSC. So again, somebody else could assemble this stuff. Somebody else could make these chips, and it's like if it's an American company, if it's a South Korean company, this can be replaced. We can get chips from other places. Now I think TSMC or TMSC, I think they've now moved to the West. They now have chip manufacturing in the West. And so it's possible to replace that. So that's kind of the biggest thing here in the list, electronic equipment. Then next is machinery and nuclear reactors, boilers. I mean, doesn't GE make nuclear reactors? I mean, GE, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think General Electric still makes these things, and Siemens maybe still making these things, and there's some other companies that actually make nuclear reactors and machinery. I mean, I live in Germany. I mean, we thrive on machines. We make all kinds of machines and bits and pieces. So, yeah, that can.
You're
be
very
replaced.
American that way.
Yeah, that can be replaced. So we don't have to buy. We don't have to buy Chinese at all. Next, the last bit, the machinery was 88 billion. 88 billion. Next, furniture, lighting signs, and prefabricated buildings, 30 billion. Do you
30 billion in prefabricated buildings?
Yeah, prefabricated buildings, lighting signs, and furniture. Do you own Chinese furniture? I don't.
Well, no, I have my furniture custom made in America. It's pretty expensive, some of my furniture. I always just try to buy American.
Oh, I'm digging the bookshelves, man. I'm really really liking your bookshelves. And so they're not Chinese. I don't think this desk here is Chinese.
Well, the Amish made the black bookshelves are Amish made. This one behind me, that's made in, I think that's made in Florida, but anyway, yeah, because if you want quality, but if you're going to buy something cheap, I think IKEA's furniture is maybe made in China now, the Swedish company.
Yeah,
fit it together. Stuff. Although I have to admit, I do have a couple junky things for like I have a TV stand, and it's probably made in China.
Yeah, or you're just not aware exactly
because you can't buy a fine piece of furniture for that.
Yeah, but also when we talk furniture,
the TV probably is.
I mean, the last time I was in one of those IKEA stores, I saw a lot of products that could have been made in China, or they look like other products that are clearly made in China or labeled as made in China. So that's kind of it's kind of a neat thing.
I had an IKEA. Years ago when I was in my 20s, I bought an IKEA bookshelf, and it was even. I mean, I was so poor. I was a graduate student. I was broke, and I was getting all these books, and so I thought, well, it's Swedish, whatever. And then of course you have the the pain in the butt to put it together, right? You
Yeah.
have to find the holes, and of course I'm a retard. You put a wrench in my hand and I shake. I've actually done plumbing. I've actually done some things, but I usually the water squirts me in the face at some point, and then I have to call a real plumber. That actually happened, but it wasn't my fault, right? Because it was just a rotten pipe, and it
Oh,
just burst.
water
It wasn't
pipes.
my fault. It was just a rotten pipe. I
Yeah,
had
yeah,
a
no, no.
about a 100-year-old house,
Water is
right on a
difficult.
Sunday morning. Went
Yeah.
to turn the water back on. Worked on it all Saturday.
Mm.
Replaced the toilet tank. But the thing is that with this IKEA bookshelf I got, I was so proud of it. It looked kind of nice. But when I moved to Michigan and I
Oh,
had
you
it for a
disassembled
while,
it.
no, I moved it and it sagged.
Hmm. Okay.
And one of my friends came over and he looked at the bookshelf and it was sagging sort of to the
Yeah.
left. And it was like, that's bad. You're going to have to replace. That's when I got the
Mm.
Amish bookshelves.
Mm.
But and they're they're really solid and they're heavy, but they don't sag.
Yeah. I mean, if you're young and financially struggling, there's old
You're
stuff.
gonna buy
People give
IKEA
away.
if you're young and struggling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people give away stuff. People even give away stuff that's 50 years old and still looks kind of cool, right? It's solid wood. It's you can make things work if and not buy Chinese furniture. So that
Yeah,
lighting science. Yeah.
you should avoid the Chinese. You should buy with items. It was interesting. After the crash in 2008, I had not been able to buy. I was a fountain pen guy when I was a kid. I learned when I was in junior high the beauty of a fountain pen. Ballpoint pens,
Mm.
they run out. You got these.
Oh
Now
yeah.
these are a little better. The Sharpies, the roller pens, they're pretty nice. But I thought, you know what? I just love the feel of the fountain pen, the way the ink flowed. I like the thick lines. I really like thick lines when I write. I like to be able to see it on the page. And so I always had these fountain pens, and they were American made when I was in junior high and high school. Always, and in college, it was always a fountain pen I wrote in. And they were wonderful, and they had little cartridges. They kind of look like they come in boxes like
Oh
this.
yeah. Yeah.
This is the French one, Waterman, right? But they were Schaefer was the one that made them, the American company. When I was, and then suddenly they didn't make them anymore. And then because they give out, the nib gets bad and rusty, whatever. So I went out. I think it was in the 1980s, maybe late 80s. I went to the store. I thought, well, I'm going to need to get a fountain pen because my old ones aren't working anymore. And I love to take notes. I get little notebooks and I write in them. And so it was like, oh gosh, 20 something bucks. And they're all made in China. The French ones are made in China. The German ones are made in China. The American ones are made in China. And I thought, okay, I'll bite the bullet, because it used to be when I was a kid, I could get it for $5 or $4, whatever, $4.99. And they were wonderful, and they you could just see, you could look at the precision making of them, the American made. And I got this Chinese one, brought it home right out of the box. It skipped, it wouldn't write, it wouldn't flow. Trying to get it to go, couldn't get it. So I went and I spent another $20, got a French one made in China. It wouldn't go, and so I didn't use fountain pens for years until finally, with the 2008 crash, I saw in one of the office stores a made in America fountain pen again. And I thought, oh my gosh,
I need to
it's
have
made in
it.
America. I got to buy it. And I bought it and it worked right out of the box. It's like flowing. And I used it for years until it they lasted about 4 or 5 years. And I thought, well, I'm going to go get another one. Well, they were all made in China again. Because it was right then, I don't know, 2008 crash. Somebody thought they were going to make pens here. And I guess they didn't sell enough of them. And of course, I discovered, Japanese ones. So I bought Japanese ones, and they work. But I don't know if they're made in China or the Japanese are just better at getting the Chinese to make it. I don't know. But China. When China makes something, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, because
I don't know if you noticed.
manufacturing is a complicated process, and if you've ever seen a fabrication process, the precision and the planning, and there's some people involved in making things that some people, they have almost a sixth sense about them, right? I mean, I saw this little documentary piece about a German gun manufacturer. It's quite famous internationally, Heckler and Koch. I think they're from the southwest of Germany. And they showed this fabrication process, right? And they had all this fancy machinery and the CNC milling, that's kind of the usual stuff that they use. But they also had this one guy, and he would get these barrels. They have these hexagonal or polygonal rifling and some of these barrels. They started doing that. Mm-hmm. And so they make these precision barrels, but then there's this guy who just, when these are made, he just takes these barrels and he touches them and he looks at them and he kind of has this magical sense of, okay, there's one in the batch that is not quite right. I mean, they have all the measuring equipment, they have all the stuff, but they still run every barrel past this one guy for some reason, right? And so it's like you can't just move machines to China.
Well, I'll say something. Of course, as the generations go, we're losing our culture, our culture for excellence. Of course, I'm Swedish American, and what was really interesting growing up, and of course, my grandparents, they were farmers and ranchers, and like most people were, but we had professors in our family and people who had certain skills. My great uncle was a carpenter. He was a doughboy in World War II. My Uncle Albert. But the perfectionism that was in my mom, that was in my dad. My dad was a filmmaker. He directed films. He started out as an editor on ABC television in Chicago. And he would work down in the basement. He had his, in those days, they ran a film through a thing. You turned a screen and you saw the camera in a little thing. And he had this great big contraption in the basement. He had his own little office down there. But
what do you call it? A flatbed? I think called a flatbed editing machine,
something like that. He had him, and I used to be fascinated. I used to pick the film. He chopped the film. Back in those days, it was all film, and he'd chop it off to edit it. He was actually chopping pieces of film.
Oh yeah.
Of course, it's all electronic now. But
that's where that's, by the way, if the people don't know, when you have a digital editing program nowadays, right? And there's this little window where you have your source clips that you can then assemble on a timeline. And the source window is still called a bin because they use these aluminum trash bins and have a plastic liner. And so you could put the little strips of film that you've pre-cut, you could put it on the edge of that bin. That's why it's still called a bin.
I grew up with that in the house, in our basement, when we lived in Chicagoland, in Elgin. And, of course, so that's where my dad started. But the dedication of my elders when I was a little boy to perfection. And so when you had to do any task, whether it's mowing the lawn, whatever it is as a kid, whatever chore it is, washing the dishes, you were expected the certain standard.
Yeah.
And it was, cleanliness is next to godliness. And so this was just sort of drilled into us. And it was almost, well, it was mean at times, right? So it and of course, I saw it in, both sides of my family and my great uncles and aunts. And in their care of food, you can poison yourself with food real easy. A bad batch of mayonnaise that's left out. You have to take great care. And of course, with these industrial products, you talk about the Germans and the Chinese and the care that goes into it. You got a society in China, and the Russians have this similar problem where people are treated badly and the bosses don't care. So that's reflected in the workers don't care. There's the Soviet slogan, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. And you look at you spoke about guns. My favorite handgun is a Beretta. Italian. And that is such a precision instrument.
Italian.
Right?
It's too big for my hand. It's too big for my hands.
No. They're small. My hands are relatively small.
Mine are smaller.
Are they really? Your hands are small?
Yeah. I shot I shot a Beretta. What is it called? The Beretta 92 FS.
9mm. The 9mm.
And it's like with the trigger pull. I'm like, I love this gun, but it's my hands are too small, and And I think
Yeah.
they don't make a version where you can change the back plate, the straps, so you can make the grip smaller. I don't think they had that at the time, so unfortunately, this was not the gun for me.
It was I could on the range I could pick it up cold and shoot through the middle of the target with the thing because it had such a good sight and everything was so well made on it, and it had a good feel to it. But the thing is that you had to clean it. You have to clean it because it will jam if you don't keep it oiled and cleaned. It will jam. So it's a precision instrument, and it has to be treated right. It has to be treated with the kind of perfection that made it. But then you've got other more rough and tumble guns that you don't need to be that way about. And but I had my buddy wanted to buy a pistol. This is back in the 90s when I bought my Beretta. He wanted to buy one. He didn't want to spend as much. I mean, Beretta is a very expensive weapon. I forget how much I paid at the time, but I think they're well over $1,000 to buy one now. But anyway, they were selling Chinese pistols.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, you could get one for like $50, for a Chinese pistol. And I
so
thought,
you mean like older designs, like Soviet
right, older
era.
design Chinese People's Liberation Army sidearm, right? And they were mass selling them. I bought an AK-47 at the time. But he got this Chinese pistol, and the gun stores were full of all this stuff from China and Russia back in the 90s, And so anyway, we go to the range, and he takes this thing out, and the first shot, it jams. This thing just, clean right out. It just jams. The bullet just jams. And it's like, so we cleared the jam, and we got it to fire a couple times, but it was just jamming all the time. And it's like, you want a pistol that jams that much? And it's clean. It's not been used. It's oiled. It's clean.
Well, according to Soviet statistics, they made a gun. Whether it works or not, that's a soldier's problem.
Right.
But they fulfilled the quota, and they made a specific number of guns.
You can tell by looking at these Chinese weapon, and also the AK-47 too. Compared to the AR-15 or a comparable American weapon, it's the milling, the precision, everything about it. It's rougher. Now it's simpler. It's cheaper. Right, it's a much simpler weapon, it's a cheaper weapon, but it's not as finely made. Right?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing. And you go to tanks, and you go to missiles, and you go to aircraft, and there's some advantage to some of the things the Russians and the Chinese do, of course, the cost advantage, the fact that they can make more. But when you get into more advanced weaponry, like we have today, it almost is. They get wiped. There's a reason that and of course here the Ukrainian army is a partial Soviet army because it was the Soviet army, but it has upgrades. That NATO upgraded. They got training. They got NATO ways of doing things. Not entirely in the Ukrainian army, but even that has made it so there's a 7-to-1 kill ratio. That is, you got 50,000 dead Ukrainians and 350,000 dead Russians after 3 years of warfare. Whatever the numbers are right now, that's the dead, not the wounded. And you go back to the Russian Civil War, you go back to World War II, especially the first year or two of the campaign in the East that the Germans had. You got this 7-to-1 death ratio. In of course, the Russians ended up, because the German line was so poorly defended in the later war, the Germans start losing. That half of the Germans that died in World War II died after January 1st, 1945.
Wow.
Did you know that? And the reason why is the Germans you didn't have enough fuel and ammunition for your units to work efficiently. So when you're not supplied and you're still fighting to the death, you're dying.
Yeah.
Run out of ammunition, you're dead.
There's historical records of spy cases between the Germans and the French. This is World War One and even pre-World War One. I think the war of 1870 roundabout. So
the Franco-Prussian War.
So this is when the new series of rifles came out. I don't exactly remember the specifics, but they had like a new rifle. The Germans, I think, had a new rifle, and it was a significant upgrade to the older models because it was accurate up to, what was it, 400 meters, not 200 as before, or even better accuracy at 400 and 200, and the old ones you couldn't fire them at like 400 meters of a distance. And so this kind of changed warfare, because now you could be further back, you still hit the enemy. And there was like this intricate little spy case where some cleaning lady got recruited and she stole papers out of the basket, waste basket. And so the French found out about this new rifle, and they had somebody steal like 2 or 3 of these rifles, and the Germans went ballistic, and they tried to come up with a counterintelligence operation to try to chase these missing rifles and find the people who stole them and transported them, because they wanted to prevent this stuff from reaching the French. And then when I think this was the 1870 war,
Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah, when this war happened, or was it a later war? I think this is when when some of these French capitulated. They basically told these German generals, "Oh, you only won because of your new cannons, the new artillery cannons. These made from special steel, Krupp steel, and that sort of stuff." And so that's kind of like, the precision has such a great influence on warfare, and if it permeates everything.
Does.
The mentality just permeates everything. All right,
it does, and this is why you have a country like Germany, and I think it's a trait maybe of people who live in the far north. Scandinavians have it.
To figure things out.
People live in the cold. Although the Russians live in the cold, but they have poor soil, and the Russians are fairly demoralized as a society. They have been for a long time. But it is for those peoples, if you're not precise in your calculations, you don't make it through the winter. You don't live, right?
Yeah.
You die. But that's interesting.
All right, so
interesting idea.
Next on the list is toys, games, sports, requisites. 30 billion. Now this is what comes to the US, to America from China every year so far.
Oh, but you're not going to let Fluffy have his little toy.
Yeah, I mean, stuffed animals, toys, games, and sports requisites. What's sports requisites? What do they mean by that?
I don't know, balls? Baseballs?
Yeah, sports items, right? Yeah. Okay, the
badminton sets?
Yeah,
nets?
Exactly. The stuff, that kind of stuff you buy that anybody else could make. This is part of this huge trade deficit. Next, 23 billion of plastics. Really? Plastics? I mean, Germans have mastered plastics. I mean, where I come from, they had this huge factory making advanced plastic items for cars, like the dashboards. And then they got into the, what is it called, what they use for handguns and rifles? Polymers. Like the advanced types of plastics, where you have to have a rifle, a handgun, like a Glock, handgun, where the grip is made from polymer. So many countries can make plastics, plastic products. That's 23 billion from China. Next, 18 billion articles of apparel knit or crocheted. So basically clothing. Okay, so I think pretty much anybody can make clothing these days. We don't need China for that. Then there's 18 billion of commodities not specified according to kind, so that's just fluff apparently. 18 billion vehicles other than railway and tramway. So cars maybe? Electric cars? I mean, we can make electric
vehicles
cars.
Other than no, it could be golf carts.
Next we have articles of iron or steel, 13 billion. Okay, I mean,
13 billion in steel. Well, our steel industries aren't quite putting out. Are yours? Is the German steel industry protected? Do you still make steel in Germany?
ThyssenKrupp, I think. I think the merger of Thyssen and Krupp, I think they're still around.
So they still make steel.
I'm not exactly sure what they make specifically. I'd have to check it out. But it's still like that. I think they merged at some point, Thyssen and Krupp, and they're
It's always
still
a
around.
bad sign when they merge. It means they can't make enough money as their own companies.
Yeah, I mean that's a yeah, distinct possibility here. And now then we got yeah, we got uh more clothing, 12 billion. Then we got almost 12 billion in optical, photo, technical, medical apparatus. Okay, we don't need China for that. Another 10 billion, other made textile articles, sets, worn clothing. Really? So then we get footwear, gaiters, and the like, 9.45 billion. Footwear. Next, organic chemicals, 7.4 billion. Next, 6 billion. Articles of leather. And it goes on. Tools, cutlery, bird skin, feathers, artificial flowers, human hair, glass and glassware, aluminum, paper products, ceramic products, wood products, 3 billion. Rubbers, pearls, tobacco. Really? 2.3 billion in tobacco. Chinese tobacco goes to the US. 2.35
And
billion.
here in the U.S., we make the best tobacco in the world. Why would we import
Do
tobacco
you know
from China?
anybody who buys Chinese tobacco?
I can't imagine
Where,
what they're smoking. What are they smoking?
yeah, I mean, yes, that's okay, a surprise to me. Then we got pharmaceutical products, just 2 billion. I think that can be replaced. Inorganic chemicals, headgear, essential oils, perfumes, cosmetics, printed books, railways, tramway locomotives, fish, 1 billion, aircraft, not even a billion, vegetables, almost a billion, meat, almost a billion, and that's kind of it. So this is what's been coming into the U.S., into America, year after year from China. Now this is the trade deficit. So all this Chinese stuff comes in that people either don't need or can get elsewhere, can be made elsewhere. All the stuff comes in, and only a fraction of that volume in goods goes out to China. Interesting. So China seems pretty useless. It seems pretty useless. Yeah, and even when you read the media reports, they can't come up with anything significant, right? So you check out the Wall Street Journal, you check out the New York Times, and they give you these silly examples, right? Here. Arlen Nersessian, a Temecula, California-based kitchen equipment importer, messaged his Chinese agent on Wednesday to hold his latest shipment of cast aluminum plates when he heard that Trump was pushing up tariffs, but it was too late. That order from China will be his last. Quote, "There's no way I'll get any of these in the US." He might have to cut most of the company's 9 employees and contractors, switch to cheaper software, and stop traveling to food shows to advertise his products just to hunker down and survive. Cast aluminum plates. Really?
I don't know. Does anyone use that?
Well, it seems like camping gear, right? It's like okay, you need
Yeah,
a
that's
lightweight
right. Yeah.
trekking and hiking, but I mean anybody can make
Yeah.
an aluminum plate. It's like you stamp a piece of aluminum and you got yourself a plate apparently. It says
aluminum plate.
China accounted for around 13% of all US goods imports in 2024. Smartphones, toys, and industrial parts. Entire businesses have been built around assumptions of that access with design, marketing, and distribution in the US coupled with production in China. Blah, 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 blah. Quote, to put it bluntly, we can only hang on for as long as we can. If we can't hold out any longer, we'll have to shut down the factory, said Hong Bin, who runs Shenzhen Jiaoyang Industrial, a maker of stuffed toys in southern China. Sales to the US account for 70% to 80% of the company's revenue, Hong said. He expects orders to stop coming and thanks to Trump's tariffs. Stuffed toys. Then there's another example. Here, the president and chief executive of Velong Enterprises, which makes grilling tools, kitchenware, and home products in China, India, and Cambodia. Sold by major retailers, including Walmart and Target. The guy says he'd lost about $10 million and canceled orders for his China factory from tariffs so far. From a 2025...
Well, see, there's the thing. You said there's 10 million Chinese jobs on the line, or did you say a higher number?
Hang on a sec.
And that's just this.
It says here, Goldman Sachs estimates that between 10 million and 20 million jobs in Chinese factories are geared towards satisfying American consumers' demand for stuff. Between 10 million and 20 million.
That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of people out of work. Yeah, not as many as I would have thought. I would have thought the unemployment would be worse, but of course,
but it could cascade. I mean,
weapons, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it could cascade because the factories in China that make these things for the American market, these factories, they buy machines and stuff and office equipment and other stuff and work clothing. They have to buy it from somewhere else. So if that factory goes down, they take other jobs with them. I would assume. So it might be even worse than 10 to 20 million.
Well, if they open an arms plant, they'll just they'll have the office equipment for that, right?
Yeah.
I think that they're going to change over to. I mean, the Chinese are talking about. I saw an ex on Twitter. I saw a Chinese lady. She called Americans. She said, "We're not afraid," and they're quoting Chairman Mao about, we will fight as long as we have to. It's up to the Americans. And she called us white pig bastards.
Okay.
This Chinese lady on X. And, this is, of course, she's going to have a higher social media score now that she has stood up against the white barbarians. But this is kind of what you're going to get in China. Of course, we have generously opened our markets to China, which is an enemy country run by communists. We should have never done that because their intelligence services use their relationship with U.S. business to manipulate U.S. politics and to manipulate our system and to subvert us. And we shouldn't have it. We should not tolerate it a minute. And then they steal. Who was the guy who was on, a guy who had traded with China? He was on TV over the last 10 days, and he said, I think we should have 400% tariffs. And he says, I've invested a ton in China, and they just cheat you. They just cheat you, and they steal things, and they steal intellectual property, and they renege on their deals. And he said, they're terrible to do business with. Well, yeah, I mean, I remember Colonel Stanislav Lunev, who worked in China. He was a GRU officer, worked for the Russian military intelligence. And somebody, a journalist asked him, I was standing next to him, a journalist said, what do you say about investing in Russia and China? He says, don't. Yeah. They're going to cheat you. You're going to lose. You might make some money at first, but in the long run, you're going to lose.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when retail, I mean, because this is all this stuff that comes in or came to the US. This is all about retail. I mean, we heard these examples. We sell, aluminum plates, but they're made in China, or we sell stuffed animals that are made in China, blah, blah, blah. It's always about retail, right? So retail means I buy a product that somebody else made. I buy that product and I sell it to somebody else, or I contract somebody to make something and just sell it to somebody else.
Well, you maybe heard that Amazon has stopped taking, ordering and setting up things from China.
When Amazon came around, they sort of destroyed retail to a significant degree because it was like this tactic of let's run at a loss for 10 years and then maybe the competition is dead and then maybe we'll actually make a profit and then there's no competition anymore. Of course, that never really truly worked. I don't think Amazon made significant profits from retail. They made a lot of money with Amazon Web Services. I think some people are just completely unaware of that. So a lot of websites are hosted on Amazon Web Services, or hosting companies, they will contract or subcontract Amazon Web Space. So you get a website, you host with a company, but it's actually going to be hosted on Amazon Web Services. But the retail thing is kind of dead. It became like this cannibalism. Who can get a cheaper product from China or more products from China, because it's just, cheaper, so people buy that. And it's like this death spiral. Taxes got higher, money was wasted, especially by the Democrats, and business opportunities were wasted and prevented. And so life became harder for people, so they're incentivized to buy Chinese goods. So then you saw Amazon Marketplace, right? People try to sell actual products, Western-made products on Amazon, but then came the Chinese competition, because Amazon is also a marketplace. Everybody can sell on Amazon Marketplace. So then you got all these products that are being sold there, and it became an issue when people bought these iPhone chargers with Apple logos on it, but they were not Apple made. They were just the most insecure, unsafe trash, could kill people, but somebody printed a fake Apple logo on them, or an FCC logo or a CE logo, pretending that it's safe for Western markets. And it's like, retail is such a big problem anymore. I mean, it's useless nowadays probably to start a retail business. Because we actually need to make things. You need to have your own product and sell that product. It's not like you can just do it the way it's been done for a while. And I think the things that really improve our lives mean wealth, and those very things can't come from abroad or don't need to come from abroad, like owning your own piece of land. China does not make U.S. land. You want houses and flats. We don't need Chinese workers and materials to make houses and flats in America. Then owning good cars, reliable cars is owning good cars. Cars is important for life quality, and we don't need Chinese electric cars, especially when they were made from blueprints that were stolen from the West anyway. A Chinese electric car may be priced under value, meaning the communist dictatorship may be willing to lose money for every single car they sell. I can, on top of my head, the only other historic example I can remember of a dictatorship being willing to sell cars at a loss, losing money for every car they sell. The only example that comes to mind is Nazi Germany, because they planned the original version of the Volkswagen Beetle. It wasn't called the Beetle, it was called Käfer. It was called the Kraft durch Freude Wagen, which means like power through joy car. And they couldn't make cars. The Nazis couldn't make cars in volume with a profit, which the Americans were really, really good at, even before the Nazis. And but the Nazis couldn't do it, so they were willing to lose money on every car. And so so if people started to think, I'm gonna buy a Chinese electric car because it's cheaper, I save money, so that's an advantage for me because I pay less. But if this goes on and on and on, I mean, if you end up under communist control, if the competition is dead, then that's ultimately the communists will decide who gets what car and for what degree of loyalty to the regime. Even in Eastern Germany, you had to wait years to get a horrible, flimsy car. Now, people can check out videos on the web. Car enthusiasts, for entertainment purposes, they review old Soviet cars, like the East German Trabant, or the Lada, or the Zhiguli, right? This box-style van thing they had. And these cars are hilarious. I mean, literally hilarious. They're hilariously bad. Now, Germans had to wait, I think, 10 years to get one of these cars. You had to be put on a waiting list, as if you're buying an exclusive Rolex watch. Put on a waiting list, wait 10 years. I don't think you have to wait 10 years to buy like a Rolex Daytona. But you wait 10 years, you get this crappy car, and if if a tire goes out, you have to wait a significant amount of time to get a new tire, or a rim. If a rim gets damaged, you have to wait for a new one. And so this is what socialism will ultimately be. So the regime decides according to their social credit system or a modern algorithm. Does the regime want to give you a car? Do you deserve the privilege of a car? And so, yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of like what wealth truly means. You have your own piece of land, maybe, or you own an apartment, or you can rent an apartment for a good price. Space, vehicles, objects, the objects that make your life easier, that improve your life quality. This is what wealth means. I mean, wealth doesn't mean you have X amount of currency, which may have no purchasing power. It's about the things that you own and the freedoms that you have and that will protect your property. That's wealth, okay, for those people who still don't really get it. So we are approaching a possible world war, and the U.S. can't pay for that while subsidizing half the world through trade deficits. So in a situation like this, the West needs additional legitimacy, and that comes through jobs and the items that people really need. Now, Russia and China may appear very weak in comparison, despite the multi-decade self-advertising campaign about glorious socialism and the pseudo-czarist Third Rome gibberish. So in the West, you will have to decide to be a whiny woke activist or a person who actually owns things. And I think that this will play a significant part in a major conflict in the near future, when the West wants or needs to show that the people have things, people have some quality of life, while these regimes over there, their populations are suffering. I mean, I remember when people in the Eastern Bloc, when they would in the 80s, mind you. So this was when the regime back then was nearing its stage, and then came the phony end of communism. But in the 80s, people would increasingly smuggle copies of Western movies and Western television shows into the Soviet Union. People would watch them, and they would be surprised to see these American television shows. With just showing characters as average people owning houses, owning cars and fridges, and having all these cool things, right? And this is what really baffled Soviet citizens or Soviet subjects, when they saw, wait a minute, we were told these poor people in the U.S., they don't have milk, they can't afford milk, they live in total poverty, and it's all cannibalism over there because Marx said so. And then they not only did the Americans have milk, they had rows and rows in a supermarket of different kinds of milk. In the Soviet Union, you had the milk. The quality of it was, dependent on the current situation of the Soviet economy. Like in China, even in recent time, China had some of the greatest food scandals, where they would mix actual milk with water and add a substance. I don't remember which one it was. They add like a chemical substance to fool the protein test. So if somebody would actually test that concoction, it would come back as a normal amount of protein. So they would say, yeah, well, it's milk then, right? But it's not. It's watered down milk with an added chemical. So this is like the differences in economies and what people can buy. So does a late model iPhone or a high-end sneaker or daily Starbucks really make you wealthy? Actually, no. Land does, housing, vehicles do. Many things people buy are depreciating, forgettable items, assets that enable you only to text other people or protect the soles of your feet. So the high-end sneakers are glued together bits of toxic rubber and leather that will look good for a few months. The new iPhone does the same things for you as the iPhone from several generations ago. So the real magic, I think, lies in productivity. How many useful, cool things can you make? Can you make them better and cheaper and more efficient? And do people actually get good wages for making these things, and they can then invest in their families and just improve everybody's lives? This is the real magic. It's not about buying the fifth, sixth pair of sneakers. They're made in China. You get all these interesting new shows on the web that are dealing with financial literacy. So it's like some financial guy who knows about financial responsibility, and they have these guests on, like these average people with no idea, with no clue, woke people, and then he goes through their finances, he checks their documents and says, okay, you spend you're eating out every day, you go to Starbucks every day, and you buy these Tinker toys from China literally every day, and this is why you are in debt. And you load up your credit cards, and then you just get deeper and deeper into the spiral. Why can't you stop buying things you don't really need? Stop buying depreciating items and focus on something that actually improves your life, and put your money elsewhere. Save your money, put it into an ETF fund, gain some ownership, a piece of ownership of corporations, really, that really make things. This is the magic. It's this productivity that we talked about, and the precision. And buying Chinese has many hidden costs. They get to skip learning to create productivity magic, and we continue to lose that ability. China spends its profits on their military, which makes our defense much more costly. It's like bait in an animal trap. Animal bait is even cheaper than cheap. It's free for the animal which approaches it. So the animal does not even have to pay any money or barter. They just approach the bait, and then they're trapped. They're absolutely trapped.
Here's the problem I have with a lot of analysis. President Trump's tariffs. What do we really think of President Trump's tariffs? First, he turns on the tariffs on April 2nd, and then 6 days later, on April the 8th, he pauses them. And apparently, originally, I was told it was just the allies, but it looks like it's a waiver on Chinese. So far, Chinese ships on the way, so that it's basically paused on everybody, it looks like to me now. And this indication is, look, disruption of supply chains could be disastrous. The loss of jobs domestically and in allied countries, the fact that China is virtually threatening war over it. Certainly China would be so badly hurt, given the fragility of the Chinese economy, how badly hurt they are by their own real estate problems and by their own banking problems. Their banking sector is ready to cave in, and China's already halfway mobilized to war. But here's the thing. I hate to mention this fabulous presentation that Andrei Illarionov gave about the war in Ukraine. He pointed out that Russia alone manufactures 4 times the war material of all of NATO, and that's including the United States. The North Korea sent twice as much ammunition to help Russia in the war than America sent Ukraine. And then you've got China's manufacturing capacity. We know China is the biggest manufacturer of things in the world, and of course people say, well, they don't manufacture as fine of things, but the United States has gotten to the point where our manufacturing is so slowed down and our supply chains are so encumbered by imports that we can't build ships effectively anymore. The Chinese can still build the equivalent of the French Navy every year, and the Russians can build things, although the Russians have problems, we know, with building certain things. They're still cranking out war material. Our war material ability is less. And what you have for the first time is that without using nuclear weapons, the Russians, of course, they're losing they outproduce Ukraine 3-1 or 4-1 or more, but they're losing 7-1 on the front. That's why they're not able to win the war. Yeah. They're outproducing the Ukrainians 4-1, but they're losing 7-1 in the battling. So this is like, wow, this is kind of unexpected. And the question is can NATO do that as well? And the question is that, are we saved? But you see, China hasn't thrown its weight into the war scales yet. And we haven't talked about this. There is this impending war with Iran that we see the American bombers lined up in Diego Garcia and the talk about war and the talks, are they stalling, are they not? Netanyahu standing in the White House, Trump going, yeah, we're dictating to the Iranians. I don't think in the end the Iranians are people that are very difficult to deal with. And what I heard now, this is, I've done videos with Lee Wheelbarger, and I'm fascinated by his material. I don't know whether his intelligence collection system is correct, but I've talked to other people who are even more expert than me who said the Russians are sandbagging, Wheelbarger's onto something. So I'm going to say this, what Wheelbarger says is the Russians have been shipping nuclear warheads into Iran, and that he's been able to track them. So Russia, it would be great for Russia to cause a nuclear war or a war in the Middle East, because in that event, what happens to the price of oil? The Iranians have already threatened all the Gulf states. If you help the Americans, if you're on the side of the Americans, whoosh, we're going to hit your oil fields. The price of oil goes up to $200 a barrel. Russia makes big bucks because Russia's the next biggest oil producer. Then comes the United States and Canada, but we do it for our own domestic market. Europe and Japan are hurt very, very badly by these cost increases. And so you get a war in the Middle East. You've already got a war in Eastern Europe. Is that the signal for the Chinese to go? Is that what you get?
So you mean create this huge diversion that will cause all these ripples and well, so many others have to get involved, and this is eating up their resources.
Well, you end up in a world war, and the thing is that look, you talked about manufacturing, and I had this discussion when I was in Toronto last September with the former NORAD generals and a Canadian admiral when I was there with the McKinsey Institute put on the event. And one of the things that I learned was, look, the reason that Canada can't build warships is the shop classes. We got rid of shop classes. We haven't trained young people to be industrial workers. They don't know how to weld. They didn't learn these things. We never developed the skills of industrial labor. Our industrial arts as education is gone. United States got rid of industrial arts education, I'm told, in 1978. Not in all states, but in many states. And I remember their industrial arts, I had to take industrial arts classes. They were required, but if you really wanted to take a lot of them, you could take them all. A lot of kids, they just loved them and they took all of them. Of course, it's pretty smart. You know that, you have some of these skills. You go on to a special school, you do well, you're going to get a really good job, and that's how a lot of people in my generation made a good living. But now my generation is aging out. And of course, a lot of that hard physical labor that you do, you get injuries. You start to have to retire in your 50s. Of course, that's why you're well paid. But the United States, I'm told, we have to train a new generation of industrial workers before we can have the industrial base. That's going to take 3-4 years to just train the people and get the infrastructure going. And then we can start building and keeping up with the North Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians. Even though their quality is low, they're producing weapons that we don't have a counterpart for. And the only reason we're not suffering right now, not being overwhelmed by this communist bloc, is because the Ukrainians are killing them 7-1.
Yeah.
And that's a shock. They got us 4-1 and they're killing us 7-1. But the question is, if China weighs in, does that ratio shift? Do they start outproducing us 10-1? And then we're only killing them 7-1 and we're starting to lose? And then you got a war in the Middle East. Can we handle that? Interesting question about how it goes if the war widens. And is this what they're going to go to because they're frustrated? I don't know. Your thoughts?
We saw the reports about supposed likely Chinese fighters in Ukraine. There's been talk about 150 of them. And you mentioned this before on the show, and it's sometimes kind of easy to just declare a Chinese or let's say to say a person is North Korean even though he's Chinese, right? So you can label anything, right? You can just put a label
Chinese
on somebody.
fighters in the Russian army in Ukraine, you mean? Chinese fighters? Oh, you
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
Chinese
but also
soldiers, not
declaring
fighters is a
Chinese.
fighter plane. Soldiers, 155 captured Chinese soldiers. Yeah, I should just say I'm going to be talking to Mr. Wang tonight. Mr. Wang of Luda Media had told me in my last interview with him that there were two, or was it three, Chinese formations. He named the formations that are in Russia, Ukraine, and I've got at least part of the Tiger Regiment, 900 men training in Belarus, according to Lee Wheelbarger. That confirms Mr. Wang's information. So the Chinese are there, not in as many numbers as the North Koreans, but they have a regiment and a brigade in that theater of operations. And what Mr. Wang told me is, yeah, they'll be in Russian uniform. They'll call these units by a Russian name. So they won't say it's the Tiger Regiment. They'll say it's, the 187th whatever from the Russian army. But they capture these guys. You capture 155 Chinese in Russian uniform. You're not just catching the odd mercenary, I don't think.
Yeah, and
And
it's
the
like
same thing with the North Korean brigades. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't hide that many North Koreans, especially in days of satellite tracking and then other advanced forms of tracking, and it was I think it was meant to be found out by the West, and I think even with these Chinese, the first Chinese people that are being caught and identified, I think this may have even been meant
And of course,
to be exposed.
here's another point. Yeah, another point. If you're capturing 155, how many did you kill? Since they're
Yeah,
human wave attack, because
yeah,
there's like they'll kill 1,000 guys in a human wave attack and maybe capture 10 or 20,
yeah.
right? So how many
Oh, and
Chinese were
yeah,
killed in
and you
those
put
wave
them on
attacks?
you put these soldiers on amphetamines like the Nazis did, and then you send them out, in these human waves. And the Ukrainian machine gunners said that these waves kept coming and coming. You just gun them down, and they keep coming. And it's like zombies. They would step over the dead and keep pushing forward. And then you have these more elite Russian units in the background. They send these disposable soldiers in first, and then when it's appropriate, then these more advanced Russians will move in. And there was some Western soldiers, I think Brits and some Brits and Americans who were just volunteering, just a few people here and there, who volunteered, who had experience, and they said that yes, some of these Russians are quite capable. They can put up a real fight. But these other people, they make all these battlefield mistakes. But they're
They're
used in
lost
mass.
leaders. Yeah,
They're used
they're
in
just
mass.
there to draw fire. Yeah, the thing is in modern combat, the fire weapons are so deadly, but you need the fire weapons to expose their positions so you can have your heavy weapons take them out. And one of the things one analyst was pointing out that in these mass attacks, the same Russian units are stopping the mass attacks at each mass attack. So they're moving the same 3 or 4 Russian combat units. They're moving them to everywhere there's an attack, and they're backstopping them. So they're like expert. These units are like expert at backstopping these attacks. So it's a very peculiar way of waging war. And they're inching forward. They're making ground incrementally, but at a tremendous cost in human bodies. But they use these people's lives up. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
Really.
And at the same time, China is using its espionage. They also have like the same mentality when it comes to warfare. In the intelligence world, China has been trying to overwhelm other countries, Western countries, with the sheer amount of assets that are being used. They try to use so many agents and assets that Western counterintelligence can't track them all. They can't keep pace, because it would take a gargantuan effort to bolster counterintelligence, right? Because if you're on to someone, it can take years. It's a meticulous process till you actually find or prove espionage, or there's a spy somewhere, but you have to narrow it down. And this takes time, this takes experts, and if there are just too many of these Chinese agents, then we do have a problem. Then there was this. This is an exclusive story from the Wall Street Journal. It says, in secret meeting, China acknowledged role in U.S. infrastructure hacks. Chinese officials acknowledged in a secret December meeting that Beijing was behind a widespread series of alarming cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure. According to people familiar with the matter, years of intrusions into computer networks at U.S. ports, water utilities, airports, and other targets. It says here. Officials say Chinese hackers' targeting of civilian infrastructure in recent years presents among the most troubling security threats facing the Trump administration. The administration said it will take actions in response to Chinese malicious cyber activity. It says about a dozen representatives from both countries, including senior officials from the State Department, the National Security Council, Pentagon, and U.S. intelligence agencies, attended the high-level meeting, which hasn't been previously reported. It was led by Nate Fick, then the ambassador at large for cyberspace and digital policy in the Biden administration. And so this is kind of part of this bigger effort. So the Chinese started this years ago when people were not really thinking about a world war. This is when the intrusions started to become more and more brazen, and these hackers, they would bury themselves into their targets and lying dormant. They would stay in place and try to gain more access, just poison entire systems, waiting for the signal that may come in a few years to shut things down. Even more advanced cyber attacks. Now, a simple cyber attack would be to infiltrate a system, infrastructure, find out the vulnerabilities, and then when a signal comes, you just disable things. You just shut things off, or you tell machines to destroy themselves, to run at higher speeds, or water treatment, this too fast, this too slow, this and that at the same time, so things actually will break. Now, an advanced cyber attack happens in different stages, right? So it starts off with the first stage, and it is anticipated what the reaction of the Americans would be. They would try this, they would try that. But this has been anticipated, so then the next stage of the attack happens, and things get worse and worse and worse, to the point where the people trying to mitigate the crisis, they won't even be able to trust what's on their monitors, because they have to go by their monitors, by the systems that monitor everything, but it's spoofing, it's false information. They don't know what they're doing. It's like you're trying to drive a car, but when you shift the gears, if you shift into the third gear, it's actually the sixth, or you step on the gas, but it's actually the brake. It actually it brakes. It's not accelerating and stuff of that nature. Or you just put your blinker for the left, but it's actually the right one that goes off. And this is something that they had prepared for a long time. And it's a gargantuan task of counterintelligence when we think about what's at stake here. Now, here's a positive example. This is fairly recent. It says Ukraine's first EU sting against Russian propaganda. Because, of course, the propaganda operations, they go along with the cyber and the military operations, trying to tell people in the West to not fight, not put up a fight, that there is no war coming, or you can make a crappy deal, or there's no point in fighting. And this is a report by Anton Chekhovtsov. I've read at least one of his books, or maybe two. I read Tango Noir. And it says, it looks like Ukraine's security service and foreign intelligence service have just pulled off one of their most brilliant operations to date, targeting and arresting a particularly insidious pro-Russian propagandist. So this was like a sting, right? 2 weeks ago, Russian propaganda channels reported that Polish authorities arrested Kirill Molchanov and deported him to Ukraine. On April 1st, Ukraine services confirmed the reports. So Ukraine and Poland carried out a multi-stage international sting operation within the European Union. So the suspect is a so-called political expert linked to the media circle of Viktor Medvedchuk, and so they created this fake fellowship. They created a target which the Russians would find attractive, right? It's this thing. They called it the Media Future Fellowship, and it's kind of sort of based in Austria, and it's like it's a way to spread more of this insidious propaganda poison. And the guy went for it. He went for that fake thing. He went for the sting, and they arrested him. So the correspondence.
What charge did they arrest him now? It's interesting. So he was just an agent of influence, right?
Treason.
And they call it treason. Was he a Ukrainian citizen?
Let me just check the report.
He would have to be. If he's Russian, they couldn't arrest him for treason.
No, they couldn't.
Unless he was working against Russia, right? I mean, if you're a Russian, you're not a traitor, you're just an enemy. It's interesting. I just wonder what the legal basis is. I mean, you have free speech in different EU countries, right?
Of course. But there's...
So what is the crime exactly? And you say it's treason. Treason, that implies he's a Ukrainian citizen.
They don't
living in Poland.
Chekovtsov doesn't quite say, but it was
that's
serious,
kind of peculiar.
It was serious enough for the Polish arrested the guy, deported him to Ukraine. Well, usually what happens is when you saw that a couple of times, right? There was another case of a German guy that I was aware that he exists, and he was thought to be a standard propagandist, but he was also tied into other things. And I think he was arrested in Poland as well a while ago, and got into serious charges.
A crime? I mean, people would call me. I'm just thinking about this. People would say there's lots of people that hate me because they would say I criticize President Trump, so that I'm it's like
in previous cases, propagandists that got arrested, they were also accused of being involved in other more serious offenses, like actual crimes. So it's not like these people are always a one-trick pony just doing propaganda. They're also, in previous cases, they were also involved in other operations which were considered treasonous. There was this German guy. He was kind of involved in some false flag violence thing, terrorism of some sort. I need to pull up that case because my memory is not as good on this one, but it was a serious thing. And also
now you said this guy, his name was Chekhovson or Chekhov. What was his name?
No, this new guy. It's either Kirill in Russian spelling. Kirill.
Oh, Kirill. I think I saw that Kirill. So is he a Russian national, or you don't know? It doesn't say what.
It doesn't say in the report.
They shipped him to Ukraine.
Yeah, they arrested him in Poland and shipped him to Ukraine because some of these.
He would have to be a Ukrainian citizen for that.
Some of these guys, they are involved in all kinds of operations, not just propaganda. Let me just check out. Okay, there's another guy with a similar name. He was a Soviet composer. Oh, here's a more recent story. Doctor of Political Sciences Alexander Semchenko shared his opinion. Yeah, he was a Ukrainian. How did the SBU pull off the kidnapping of Ukrainian political scientist Kirill Molchanov, who lived in Russia?
Yeah, so he's a Ukrainian. So the thing is, as a Ukrainian citizen, he is subject to Ukrainian law. Yeah. And he's adhering to the enemies of Ukraine. He's promoting Russian propaganda in another country. So yeah, that's a righteous thing. Look, if somebody is the interesting thing is that you have got all this. Now the difference is we got all kinds of people putting out anti-American stuff all the time, and people have accused me because I'm critical of the president now. I was critical of Biden. But that's allowed in America, is we have freedom of speech. But at a time of war, you have to be careful at a time of war, because certain kinds of criticism, they are damaging and they are hurting your own side, and they are definitely adhering to the enemy. And that is a thing that you don't want to ever do. And
Yeah, I
it's,
mean, the
it's a
German.
very fine line. You
Yeah,
know, treason is a difficult, adhering to the enemy. That's a
yeah,
funny
yeah,
kind of, I know that a lot of people are adhering to my country's enemies,
yeah.
and they
But I
could be
mean,
on CNN, they could be
there
on
were,
Fox News,
yeah,
but they don't, never, nobody ever thinks of them as treasonous, right?
yeah, and
It's kind of funny.
yeah, and it's a difficult situation. I mean, I remember historical example of German intelligence. German intelligence being active in the United States before and during World War One, I believe it was, and this was kind of a mixture of sabotage operations, blowing up ammo
Yeah.
production facilities, ammo dumps.
Yeah, the United States had very, by the way, we would kill, we would basically try and execute German spies. We did it in both world wars. Because the Germany did have, in both world wars, had saboteurs here, derailing trains, trying to damage factories, things of that nature.
And
The
influencing
FBI
opinion.
was actually pretty good at it back then, yeah.
Yeah, and
In
influencing
World War II,
opinion.
they were.
Yeah, influencing opinion. It's like multifaceted.
Yeah, well, in World War One, there was an anti-German hysteria in World War One. H.L. Mencken wrote about it. He was a German American, of course, Mencken. And there was a we used the term Heine, we called Germans, and there was a real hatred that came about. And it's funny how people get in a war. You got to be really careful. And of course, you had the same thing. You had the Japanese interned in World War II, and that was a complicated issue. And since then, the U.S. government has cried mea culpa and has compensated the surviving victims of the Japanese internment. These were mostly Japanese. These were only Japanese on the West Coast, by the way. It wasn't in the whole country, because the West Coast was threatened early in the war. The Japanese actually attacked the West Coast, very minor. The Japanese submarine fleet deployed to the West Coast and was sinking ships off the U.S. West Coast.
Yeah, but didn't the
Germans
Chinese?
were
Yeah, but
things,
didn't the Japanese? Fairly early on, didn't the Japanese have a serious bioweapons program, and they had plans to use bioweapons against the U.S.?
They did, but their bioweapons program in Manchuria, from what I've read, they all of their weapons experts, they killed themselves by accident. They
Cam 731 or what it was.
I don't know which one, but one of the more deadly ones, their own scientists ended up catching whatever they were working on, and they died.
This was like a research facility. I think it was called Camp 731.
But they had a number of them, and they did use biological weapons on China. Yeah. They were using some weapons on China.
Yeah, and like this General Shiro Ishii, I think he went into hiding, and he had some documents, some files hidden, stashed somewhere. I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's like things can go very serious very fast. And here's another exclusive story fairly recently. It says a new spy unit is leading Russia's shadow war against the West, known as the Department of Special Tasks, based in the Russian military intelligence headquarters, sprawling glass and steel complex on the outskirts of Moscow, known as the Aquarium. Its operations, which haven't been previously reported, have included attempted killing, sabotage, and a plot to put incendiary devices on planes. It says
the Aquarium is GRU.
Yeah.
By the way.
The new department, which is known to Western intelligence officials by its Russian acronym SSD, is believed to be behind a host of recent attacks against the West, including the attempted killing of the chief executive of a German arms maker and a plot to put incendiary devices on planes used by shipping giant DHL. The SSD has brought together various elements of Russia's intelligence services. It has taken over some powers from the FSB. An absorbed Unit 29155, which Western intelligence and law enforcement officials say was behind the 2018 poisoning of a Russian double agent, Sergei Skripal, in the UK. The department also runs an elite special operations center known as Espionage, where Russia trains some of its special forces. So this is kind of the increase in activity, and there's some unconfirmed reports about the background of some of the more recent terror attacks in Germany, like the smaller terror attacks, stabbings for political motives and reasons, and it's usually some clinically insane migrant, somebody who's out of his mind, and they would just massacre people on the street, with edged weapons. And there's now some rumblings that the Russians may be involved in some of these cases, in order to create more friction in society, because of course you have like the political right and the new AfD party, and of course there's this argument about more security, and then there's the leftists, and they say let everybody in from any war zone, from any just chaotic region, and then you get these terrorist attacks. And I did a show once about some recent studies on what an intelligence service may be capable of, like a Russian service, when it comes to finding people who are already deranged, and influencing them subtly or not so subtly. I mean, there's like a whole bit of science about this, what it takes to push somebody over the edge, and what the psyche needs to be. There's some substances that you can use to push somebody over the edge, and then all it takes is a trigger event in that person's life. His migration visa gets rejected, his status is changed, or loses a girlfriend, or some other problem, and then this is the trigger event, and then they want to just be a terrorist and just go out with a bang.
There's also this thing that assassinations, I'm told, are going to begin in Western countries, and they're going to use organized crime to carry out assassins, and there's a death list, apparently, of people that they want to kill. And I don't know how big the death list or who's on it. Maybe you and I are on it. I don't know. Probably we're not important enough.
It's a weekly. It's like it used to be a weekly updated list. I mean, we know from the Stasi they updated the list every week.
Yeah, well, in Germany, the actual Soviet list that the Soviet armies were given, and it was the Carpathian Military District Headquarters had the task of eliminating 600,000 West Germans in the event of the occupation of West Germany by the Soviet army. 600,000 when Germany then had 60 million. West Germany had 60 million people. I think now, what are you, 80 million people now it's a combined Germany? The 60 million people, 600,000 is what? Is that 1% of the population is on a death list? That's a lot. If it was America, that'd be 3 million people. It's awfully big.
Yeah.
So I don't know what these death lists are, specific to what, maybe to certain industries, maybe to certain enemies that are irritating in the...
intelligentsia. I mean, that's what it did to the Poles. That's what it did to the Poles, because
warfare experts. Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but as people who only are trouble to Russia, people who are not engineers, kind of people that the Russians could employ, but just people who would create trouble for a new regime. And they just call it the intelligentsia, and then they would target those. And when we talk about espionage as key to a future war, a major war, there's something. I have a few notes. I have a few notes here about something. It's kind of tied into this Alexander Dugin agenda, where the Russians they try to get close to powerful circles in Europe because that's a doorway to Eurasia, and it's also a doorway into the United States. This is a guy. This is a guy that the Russians were after, and I think this is a guy that was very interesting, or still is very interesting, to Alexander Dugin. Now, Dugin always talks about we need to go back to the old days, before the Enlightenment, and of course that means aristocracy, right? But he doesn't want to be explicit. Dugin doesn't want to show his cards. He doesn't want to tell everybody whom he's really after. So we have this guy. He's called Prince Michael of Kent. Prince Michael of Kent. Maybe I'll just put that on the screen real quick so people can people have a face. People have a face attached to this. Now here we have where is it? Here we have. Okay, I need to switch to the other camera here. Okay, here we have Prince Michael of Kent. He's now 82. He's recently retired from public life, public functions. And he's been accused of selling access to the Kremlin, to Putin's inner circle, because he's that close to the Russians. And somebody like Prince Michael of Kent, through his family, he would have access to NATO secrets. NATO secrets that are very important for this future war. Now, of course, this puts him in the same category as old Lord Louis Mountbatten, who had a communist wife, who had his own communist channels to the Soviet Union, the heart of the Soviet Union. And Lord Louis Mountbatten was accused by various intelligence agencies in the West, British, French, German, American, you name it. He was accused of working for the Soviets, and he had access to all kinds of intelligence. Even the FBI opened a file on Lord Louis Mountbatten. The FBI had a file on him, on his communist wife, Edwina. But when historians fairly recently asked the FBI to release more of the files they had on Lord Louis Mountbatten, the FBI gave a weird answer. They said, we don't have those files anymore. Pretty much right after you asked for them, we destroyed them. And so, yeah, this is kind of a security hole which I would like to see plugged real fast, because Lord Mountbatten, he was accused of sabotaging NATO from its earliest stages, and his guy became the first Secretary General of NATO, his very close collaborator. So now in recent years we had Prince Michael of Kent. He speaks fluent Russian. He's basically the Tsarist family. He's basically a Romanov, so to say. Same family. He's been very much engaged in Russia. And there's this idea. There's this idea that's been floating around for a while, and I think this is what Dugin is after. I think this is what Russian intelligence is after. They want to create a blend. Okay, so you take what's left of the House of Romanov, and then you can add some of these remaining traditional Russian aristocrats, so-called Rurikid families, which are pre-selected. They are allowed to marry into the Romanovs by these old rules. So you got those, and then you got some European / German, if you want to call them, German aristocrat families. And then you have like a blend of them, right? The Romanovs in the middle, and you have the Rurikids in Russia, and then you have some Europeans in the mix. You create a blend for a new monarchy, basically in Russia, run by the intelligence service, basically KGB, or the FSB or the SVR as they call themselves these days. And all that's left, what they need would be a formal head of a Russian monarchy. They need, according to these old rules, they need one guy, designate one guy to be the leader of the monarchy, and then this guy has the power to allow specific marriages, get the system going, and figure out the line of succession. So this is kind of what the Russians are after. I think this would be a simple yet spectacular move, not just for this idea of a Eurasia, right? Claiming that they represent the true old school Europe and Russia, the old ways. This would not just be about Eurasia. This would have great effect or, just large effects worldwide, because the Russians, they want to claim they are the heart of conservatism. They are the third Rome. And of course, you need a czar. If you're Rome, you need a Caesar, a czar, a Kaiser, and so they may get one. And then they have a whole system of Russian Romanov / German aristocrats, all basically run by the KGB. It's a kind of a nightmare scenario. So who would these people be that they would put into this blend of aristocrats? Now, just so people are clear about this Prince Michael of Kent, which has been accused of selling access to the Putin inner circle, because journalists did a sting operation. They posed as representatives of somebody important with money, and they said, hey, can you get us close to the Kremlin? Yeah, it's going to cost, there's a certain price. It's just, there's a certain price attached to that. Now, Prince Michael of Kent is the younger son of Prince George, Duke of Kent, and Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark. He's a grandson of King George V, nephew of Edward VIII and George VI, and first cousin of late Queen Elizabeth II. First cousin of the Queen that died a few years ago. Michael's mother was also a first cousin of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, consort of Elizabeth II, making him both a second cousin and first cousin once removed to current King Charles III. His mother was Princess Marina, a daughter of Prince Nicholas of Greece and Denmark, and Grand Duchess Elena Vladimirovna of Russia. So, can they pull it off, restarting a new monarchy in Russia and make it a bit more Russian, not so much German? Now, this Princess Michael of Kent has he's been running a flurry of East-West organizations, right? This is where the powerful people meet, as opposed supposedly to foster East-West relationships. Now, I'm going to put something on the screen here. This is from one of these organizations that Prince Michael of Kent was a part of. This is RomanovFamily.org. This is kind of the official website. And this thing is called Succession of the Imperial House of Russia, right? If you go to the index page, it's very subdued. They don't want normal people to pay attention to this website. That's why they kept it fairly simple and bland. And here's what they say. Here's the blend they want to create. By 1911, the imperial family of Russia had grown in numbers, counting 25 grand dukes and princes, but also 14 grand duchesses and princesses, all of whom, when marrying, were obliged to conform to the Pauline laws. So, for example, everybody had to be Orthodox. They had to at least convert to Orthodox. They couldn't be, let's say, Catholic. At this point, it's interesting to consider, they say, which foreign families, without being sovereign or reigning, were considered of equal rank. Besides the truly reigning families, many German and Austrian families came to be considered of equal rank and were known as mediatized, being listed in the then prestigious Almanach de Gotha. And it says, even today, the list of mediatized families include families of great historical and political importance, such as the Arenberg family, Fürstenberg, Sein-Wittgenstein, just to mention a few. Von Quandt, they say. And especially the name Sein-Wittgenstein pops up, because Sein-Wittgenstein family The Stein-Wittgenstein family is very old and very powerful, and it's been tied to the CDU party in Germany, which is like the traditional mainline conservative party in Germany, which was basically started after World War II with the American help, with the American, in the American sector, basically. This is when the political system was created, a new political system was created in Germany. And so the CDU party, the CDU party had a bunch of military and financial scandals. Let's put it that way. So somehow, magically, money appeared or was laundered, and the CDU was able to use that money to become more successful. Now, this was, of course, part of fighting communism. This was tolerated, of course, by the Americans, because the Soviets were trying the same thing. Soviets were funneling money to other parties in Germany. But the Stein-Wittgenstein family, they've been kind of involved in this whole money laundering scheme of the CDU party. And so if the Stein-Wittgenstein clan knows secrets, even current secrets about the CDU, and if, that's just a hypothetical if some members of the Stein-Wittgenstein aristocratic family, if they switch sides to the Russians, they could give all this information to the Russians. Okay? So then they say this: from the point of view of a 20th century Russian or 21st century Russian, less and less bound by Germanic dynastic traditions, because the Romanovs were very German, it appeared ridiculous that a Russian Grand Duke could take as a bride, for example, a Countess Fugger von Babenhausen, but not a Princess Obolensky. So they have all these rules who you can marry, right? So at some point, some of these Romanovs actually married these other Russian aristocratic families. Yusupov family, for example.
What is the significance?
Well, I mean, the Rurikids go back a long time, and if people actually remember that horrendous interview that Vladimir Putin...
we all go back a long time. My ancestors go back.
And these, but if you remember...
They would have to, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean, but there was this ridiculous interview with Tucker Carlson and Vladimir Putin, when Putin was talking about the Rurikids, 1,000 years ago, when these Rurikid princes created, Russia... and this supposedly for Putin was giving Russia its legitimacy over Ukrainians and just denying their Ukrainian identity, because 1,000 years earlier some Rurikids actually controlled some territories. And so it says here, at the time of the start of World War I, there was already a current of thought among the younger Romanovs that it was time to jettison the obsolete, purely Germanic group of mediatized families, that means families were allowed to marry into the Romanovs, and create a purely Russian equivalent. Considered of equal rank would be the most outstanding and purely Russian Rurikid families such as Baryatinsky, Beloselsky, Belozersky, Dolgoruki, Gagarin, Lobanov, Rostovsky, Obolensky, Odoevsky, Repnin, and Tatishchev. Also considered would be esteemed families.
Do we have to know all that? That's an awful lot to know.
Well, these families still exist, these Rurikids. Also considered would be esteemed families.
Yeah, but what are they doing?
Well, they could actually assemble.
No, what are they doing? Not what they could do. What are they doing?
Currently, well, I'm figuring this out right now, because there's also a list here on Prince Michael of Kent's website. Basically, let me put this on the screen. Here is an overview of what's actually left of the Romanov family. Now, these are the actual Romanovs that are left. These are not some pretenders. These are not some, phonies that have been running around. So this is the website, the Imperial House of Russia, House of Romanov. Living male descendants of Emperor Nicholas I as of September 15th, 2014. So not the most current list, but bear with me. So, head of the Romanov family, Dmitry. Following are listed in the order of date of birth. And then you get these people here. And if you notice, they all married Americans, mostly. So here you have Andrew, son of Prince Andrew Alexandrovich, and Donna Elisabetta Rufo dei Principi di Santi Antimo from the United States. The next Romanov, Alexis, born 1953, he is the son of Helen Durnev from the United States. Dmitry Romanov, born 1954, his mother is Angelica Kaufman, USA. Michael Romanov, again, mother Angelica Kaufman, USA. Peter Romanov, the mother is Kathleen Norris from the United States. Andrew Romanov, mother Kathleen Norris, USA. Next guy, mother is Pamela Kutsinovsky, United States. Again, Pamela Kutsinovsky, United States. The next guy, Rostislav Romanov, born in 1985. He's a bit younger than I am. His mother was Christia Ibsen from the United Kingdom. Nikita Romanov, born 1987. Also, the mother is Christia Ibsen, United Kingdom. And then we get living female descendants of Emperor Nicholas I. Here we have all these Romanov women. Here we have Ekaterina. The mother is Princess Elena Petrovna of Serbia. And we have another mother of a Romanov, Irene de Hohenfelsen, Princess Parley from France. And we have another mother, Princess Natalia Galitzine, United States. Then United Kingdom. A mother from the United Kingdom. And we have another Romanov mother, Countess Sveva della Gheradesca from Italy. We have another mother from Spain, Italy, USA, Italy, USA, United Kingdom, USA, Spain, and USA. So these people are still around. And this is just an overview of what's left of the Romanovs. And then we got all these Rurikid families that we just heard mentioned by this Romanov website. So you got Dolgorukov and all these very, very old Russian families that also still exist. And and they want to create a blend. And they have this to say on that Prince Michael of Kent website. They say they need a head. They need a head of that, a literal head of the family structure. So if the Putin regime or Russian intelligence, if they decide, okay, this guy is going to be the new head of the monarchy, then this new head of the monarchy, who is run by Russian intelligence, can designate the lines of succession, who gets to marry into whom, and then they have a system. Then they have an actual monarchy system. And they have this to say. These are the words of Nikolai Romanovich on the website that's basically the responsibility of Prince Michael of Kent, who was accused of selling access to Putin's inner circle. It says, there is much discussion in and outside of the family about the rights to the throne of Russia. But the real question is whether the Russian Federation now needs a monarchy. The question is left to individual opinions. It is certainly a positive sign that there is so much interest in Russia in this historic past of the Romanov family, but this is not a guarantee that a monarchic system could be beneficial to Russia either today or in the distant future. The choice of a new monarchy has to be left to the people of Russia, a choice that must not necessarily be of a hereditary monarchy, but might also be of an elective one. We, the Romanov family, exist. God save Russia. So, is this the blend which Alexander Dugin wants under control of Russian intelligence? You know, have Rurikids and Romanovs and some Germans with access?
Well,
to military
The thing
secrets?
look, Alexander Dugin, the guy who tries to advance right wing themes through the whole world, not just in America or Europe, but in Africa and Asia and Latin America, is so many of these themes. I was going through, Arcto's journal, and I was reading this pagan revival, and then there's the Catholic sites that quote Dugin, and there's the Muslim sites that quote Dugin, and it's all of its nonsense. A couple weeks back, Dugin was praising the Sunnis, saying that they were the only true Muslims, and then the Houthis, they were the only true Muslims, and now that Iran might be going to war, the Shiites are the only true Muslims, right? I mean, he's the whore of today's front page. Dugin it's whatever's hot and anti-American, so he's posturing is excited that Trump is president. He loves Vance. He loves Curtis Yarvin, probably his protege, who knows. And he's got the dark illumination going, the dark enlightenment, quote unquote Nick Land. He's got all these American conservatives are eating out of Dugin's hand. It's pneumachia, which is mind warfare or war against the mind. And at the same time, he's really excited that the Shiites are going to maybe sink an aircraft carrier, right? That the Shiites are going to defeat America in a war. He's saying they're really brave. They're standing up against America. So Dugin it's such nonsense. He's on everybody's side, but really he's on the side that destroys America. He wants to promote narratives in America that destroy America. It's like Trump with his tariffs shouting, "Stop or I'll shoot," and all of his weapons are aimed at himself. Right? He's going to blow him $9 trillion in market losses from the 6 days he had the tariffs on. Of course, there's been some market rallying, but the damage done by the it's clear now. We understand Trump. He's a complete amateur. He doesn't know what he's doing. Anyone who believes he's playing 5D chess, he is just winging it. He doesn't know a darn thing. The guy's an ignoramus. I always knew he didn't know much. Now I know how little he knows. He's revealed it. He knows nothing. And he's a complete sucker. And he's surrounded by people who are eating out of Dugin's hand. The joke in the Dugin networks is that Dugin is the real president of the United States. He's maybe really he's obviously humoring the clerics in Tehran. And of course, he's helping China. He's got offices in China. He's egging on World War III. And he wants to destroy Ukraine. And he wants the beautiful Europe from Lisbon to Vladivostok. He's still on about that. The beautiful Europe. And of course, it's all about his, all religions are anti-liberal and they're all really one. It's all really Aleister Crowley, don't forget, under the surface. But so, you can get caught up. They've got so many narratives. If you're proud of your Scandinavian heritage, like Tucker Carlson, I'm Scandinavian American, like he is, you might be going for the Aryan version of reality, maybe the pagan revival version. Maybe you're really upset at liberalism in America, not realizing that liberalism is just originally 19th century liberalism was about freedom. It was about the freedom to buy and sell. The freedom of speech. That's liberalism. That's the liberalism that Dugin's against. The authoritarianism or totalitarianism of Russia and China is what Dugin is for. He's really an agent of those powers. And so much of this nonsense, people take heed of this. Andrei Navrazov has recently tweeted saying they're going to have a new czar. You just watch. They're going to bring in a czar, which is what you're talking about. And I find that interesting because and of course, Andrew said, well, it's all going to be nonsense. He's going to be a fake ruler. The real people behind the scenes, who are they? They're Marxist-Leninists. That's why they're supporting Cuba. They're supporting the revolutionaries in South America. That's why they're with China and why Chinese, communist, and North Korean troops are fighting for Russia in Ukraine. It's a communist bloc. It's their international duty to help their communist brothers. It's the same reason there were Russian military officers in Vietnam and Cambodia in 1970. Same reason why there were probably Chinese troops actually operating as NVAs during the Vietnam War. So why the Chinese came in as volunteers in the Korean War. It's a communist bloc, stupid. And all these narratives that we get sucked into that we think it's going to be this, and we think it's going to, and our religion's going to be vindicated, whether you're Protestant or Catholic or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist. Dugin is with you. He's with all of you. He'll even pretend to be a Protestant if he has to. I've seen some amazing twists and turns of Mr. Dugin. There's nothing consistent about him except that he's for Russia and China, and America must be destroyed. That is his theme. Look at Heiser's biography of Dugin. Read it. That's who the man is. A KGB agent recruited almost 40 years ago, and an occultist. And of course, what does all this stuff add up to? All these nonsense. Hundreds of channels on Telegram, literally drawing young people into this net of nonsense.
Yeah,
and
but
once you get it, it's very absorbing.
We saw
the
Russians had significant success in Europe with Orthodox groups, and just creating
trying to convert people.
Creating this impression that if you're a young, angry guy, you got to be Orthodox, and then you're part of a team, and this has like this ancient glow around it, and it's like it's more manly than other forms of Christianity, and also that Orthodox thing has sort of been blended by the Russians, blended with Europe's past. So you saw all these weird chivalric orders popping up, right? This is like Germany, this is other places in Europe, when there's like suddenly there's this group and they have like this self-marketing. We're a group of knights. We just are in the tradition of knighthood, and we're Orthodox, and we love Russia, and we love the Russians. And it's always like the marketing has to have all these different elements. It used to project military power before Russia embarrassed itself in Ukraine. The military power had to be in there. They claimed cultural superiority, religious superiority. They claimed economic superiority for some strange reason, and people bought into that. That America was in decline and Russia was this great new economic entity. So they want to cover all their bases, everything that a target audience would consider important. So, and by hitting all these bases, by covering all these areas in the propaganda, it becomes more powerful. The seduction becomes bigger, and I think when they created this personality cult around Putin, of course it was a hybrid. They had something to placate traditional open communists. They had something to placate people that in Russia that didn't like communism, or people in Europe didn't like communism. They had elements of that inside of the Putin personality cult, and but there was always something missing. Putin was just a guy. His family has been looked into, but he doesn't quite represent what people crave. Now, the Germans, they got sold on Hitler, who was a nobody. And Hitler got the Iron Cross first class in World War I for some weird reason, as is still debated among historians. But at least he could sell himself as a veteran. He could sell himself as this brave soldier. But with Putin, he was a spy. He was not a soldier. Does not come, or not, at least not visibly, comes from a very old family. He's playing with the Rurikid theme. We saw this in the Tucker Carlson interview, saying he represents 1,000 years of Russian history. He keeps milking some of the czars, like Catherine the Great, Peter the Great, czars who were often quite German. I mean, it became more over time. They became more German over time. And also, even Peter the Great wanted to try to westernize Russia to some degree. So they're playing that card, but there's still something missing. I mean, Putin is old. Putin is frail. What's the next big thing? What's the next big thing in Führer mentality? Maybe it's a fake, well, a real czar, but controlled by communist intelligence. I think this would be a crowning achievement of Russian communist intelligence, if they actually have a czar who is a Romanov or is a Rurikid and is very much tied to the Romanovs and some of these Germans, and then they can claim this legitimacy. They can claim now we have something even better than Putin.
It's interesting. Andre has this idea that they're going to have a czar, and I don't know. I don't think they want to do that. I mean, it's like Putin claiming to be a Christian. He won't actually come out and say it. He'll wear the cross and he'll imply it. But when he's asked to give a testimony, he gives a Leninist testimony, even though he criticizes Lenin. But that's very Marxist to self-criticism. So I don't know about that. But it's interesting to see. Your fault. Well, let us know if you find out that Kent is the what Earl of Kent or the Duke of Kent or the whatever he is.
Prince Michael of Kent, cousin of the Queen Elizabeth.
That sounds very English, Kent. But you'll have to keep us updated if there is anything on that. But we have been going for quite a while now, and I've got to run. So I want to thank you, Alex. Do you have any final point you want to make?
What final point do I want to make? It's like, I mean, we saw an increase in poll numbers for the extreme right wing AfD party in Germany, just because of that American marketing. Because Vance was giving positive remarks about right wing parties in Europe. It's all tied into this Trump thing.
What is the poll? What is the poll number? What are they rating at now?
They're AfD? In the mid-20s. The mid-20s.
Like 25. A quarter of the electorate is behind them.
Yeah, but it's like because there hasn't been.
Does that make them the biggest party now? Then.
Well, they're almost the biggest party now, but it's like. I mean, I suspect that American intelligence has been inside of the party for a long time because it's what's been.
Let me ask you, why wouldn't the Christian Democratic Union form a coalition government with them? Why?
Well, the AfD has been very pro-Russia. That's one thing. Being the AfD being anti-NATO, in large parts anti-American, pro-Russian. That's one thing that makes them
have a coalition and agree to disagree on
incompatible. That? Well, it depends. It depends. If American intelligence if American intelligence already embedded in the AfD, which I think it is, and also if some of these powerful groups in Europe that have been behind the CDU, the mainline party, if some of these networks have also infiltrated the AfD, then it might be conceivable that there's going to be a coalition and it's going to be more pro-West and pro-US. But this extremist element, I mean, this is something that was explicitly forbidden since 1945, especially when it came to the American idea of what post-war Germany should be like. So this was like a hard no, just no fascism, no extreme right wing, no extreme right wing. We don't want that. And that's kind of a pillar of the AfD, the traditional conspiracy mythology, some very throwback stuff, revisionist stuff. That's very much the AfD, and so that makes them incompatible with the CDU, unless the AfD has been thoroughly infiltrated, which might actually be the case. Then we may see a coalition, but they don't want anybody to see what cards anybody has, really. You're supposed to watch it from the outside. You're supposed to look at it and not really understand what's going on the inside. But it's like the AfD became a thing because of this glow of Putin that was used for marketing, and the glow of Trump, and the glow of the new right-wing movement, and the glow of Elon Musk. So all of these figureheads created this super glow which the AFD could then use for its marketing, saying we're part of the future, we're the new thing. This is an international grand movement, so and this gives us legitimacy. And I think this is the main reason why the AFD climbed in the polls. And so people always have to remember, everybody, each and every one of us, we're all targets for subversion in marketing, because it's kind of the same thing most of the time. It's subversion in marketing. So it's always tailored for our taste. It's tailored according to what we fear, what we hope for, what we want to see. And it's like, if you create a super glow, then rationality goes out of the window. I mean, we Germans we Germans know this, when once rationality goes out the window. And at a time it looked like, before the Nazis fully came into power, they had the super glow, because groups inside of Germany were advocating the Nazi party. Even the aristocracy was advocating for the Nazi party. International corporations, international powers networks, international networks, they were also advocating for the Nazis and made deals with the Nazis, and this created the super glow. And people in Germany thought, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, it can't be bad, right? It can't end catastrophically if everybody's, so excited about this thing, right? And I think that what the Russians have been doing is creating this super glow, this aura, and it's like a drug. It's like an actual drug to people, because people are frustrated, they're tired, and this gives them a feeling of energy and hope. It's like alcohol mixed with other drugs. It feels rejuvenating to people. It gives them what they need, and I think that's this is what I would like to emphasize when it comes to these things.
All right. Well, thank you, Alex. And I'm Jeff Nyquist. This has been Friends and Enemies. I'm in America. Alex Benesch, my co-host, has been in Germany. And I hope you'll join us next week for another edition of our show.